I'm joined now by Alison Tilley from Judges Matter. Alison, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You just heard a few of those packages of what happened today in court as well. If you had to look at, and just based off the arguments that were presented today in court, and you had to look into your legal future ball, what would you say the outcome would be tomorrow?
Well, in a way, I have to do that because I have a flight booked to go up to Johannesburg for the JSC hearings.
Oh.
And I guess you know everything you need to know. If I tell you my flight is still booked on Sunday to go up for the JSC hearings, I think that they won't be postponed. I think they will continue. I don't think that MK and Dr. Hlophe will succeed in their application.
I think the fact that you haven't changed your travel arrangements is obviously quite telling as well. Based off what some of the arguments were put forward in representation of the former Judge Hlophe, what did you make of some of these arguments that, for instance, that it's going against the Constitution and that the meeting actually shouldn't take place, and also the request from Advocate Dalimpofu to say that maybe we should postpone it for up to 3 months? What would the implications of that be on the JSC?
Well, I think the JSC finds itself at a moment where the judiciary is, and it's a strong word, but in a crisis in terms of how many judges we have versus how many cases need hearing. And there are a number of positions obviously vacant at this point which need to be filled urgently. Those, even if they're all filled, which is not a given because you may not have enough candidates or the right candidates, we're then in a position where there are still more judges who are needed. And the judge presidents and the Chief Justice have certainly expressed themselves on that. We don't know if National Treasury is considering allocating more money to judges. But at this point, it really is urgent that the JSC does go ahead. They have an important job to do.
The argument that without Dr. Hlophe in those interviews as well, that this should not go on without one person who's also supposed to be in that room. Do you take that argument?
Well, I've been at many hearings of the JSC where there have been people who are not in the room for one reason or another. And certainly, I'm thinking the chair of the Justice Committee at one point, there was an entire hearing that he wasn't able to attend. So I think it's the practice of the JSC that provided that people have sent their apologies, they've given reasons why they're not attending, and they do attend if they can, that's pretty much always been the way it works. And that the fact that a particular member of the JSC isn't present. There are 23 of them in any one sitting, and yes, maybe if a decision is close, one person might sway the others. But as I say, this hasn't prevented the JSC going ahead. There have been one or two instances where the courts have then said, well, there has to be, the Premier must be there, or that the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal must be there. But equally in those cases, if they send a representative, an alternate, then that is dealt with. But certainly at the level of MP, that's never been a reason for a hearing not to go ahead.
Yeah, not to put you in a corner for any kind of mudslinging, but when you think about sitting alongside or having a peer where you will be making such important decisions as well, where that same body has also found that he isn't ethical enough and doesn't display the correct behavior of somebody of that legal profession to even continue as a judge, how do you feel about then sharing that platform with that kind of person? Or do you feel that, his experience, apart from what he was impeached for, stands for itself?
No, and I think that there is no special knowledge that Dr. Hlophe brings. I mean, in fact, he's really only been a judge president, so he doesn't have any experience as a member of parliament. It's not clear what he brings particularly as a member of parliament, but he hasn't been one for a particularly long time. I think the applicants in the urgent application in the Western Cape High Court made out a case for why Dr. Hlophe should not sit in the JSC, and they were successful, which is why he won't presumably be there on Monday. And I think the JSC is, not that they'd say this, but can breathe a sigh of relief that in fact he is not there, because it is inappropriate for him to be there.
Mm. And speaking about that as well, that it is inappropriate for him to be there in the first place, which is some of the arguments that have also been put forward as well. The other challenge that has been put forward, and I think this one was by the DA's legal representative, Advocate Michael Bishop, who spoke about the cost of this all. You earlier were speaking about the need for these judges and for us to fill these vacancies, and we may not even be able to fill all those vacancies in any way. But then add on to that the cost of all of these legal implications as well.
I think that's it was a well-made point. I think his point was also that the JSC, in circumstances, made a rational decision, which I think is correct. We cannot afford to waste not just money, but also time. This is a very expensive exercise in terms of people's time. These are taking people who have, really heavy schedules, who find time, they defend the time, they set it aside, they don't take other work. And they show up having read papers which are really, I'm not exaggerating. You see my hands. It's sort of, the documentation is extensive. It's difficult to even quantify that, let alone, the actual costs of hotel and flights and those things. And I think that's another reason that it just, it doesn't make any sense for postponing the JSC for one member of parliament.
Mm. And finally, just before I let you go, as well, when you're speaking about everything that goes into it as well, the cost as well, but just what would the implications be if we continue in this path? Does then the JSC then get affected? Of course, then they aren't able then to do their work. Should the court rule that, of course, in favour of the MK party and Dr. John Hlophe? What does that mean for ordinary South Africans? What does that mean for people like you and I, people who are in perhaps in the justice system already and waiting for their cases to be heard too?
No, I think people are really already very frustrated with the delays in the judicial system, waiting for years for a court date, literally now 2028, 2029, and certainly in the busy divisions. And it relates to everything. If you have opposed matters that need a trial, that need a length of time, whether it's a criminal matter or a labor matter, these are all things that we need judges to be available for. And if they haven't, for whatever reason, been appointed, and we have been sharply critical of the JSC previously in not necessarily advertising positions timeously, and particularly the Constitutional Court vacancies, it really, we really do have to make sure that the JSC is able to do its work, which is an important constitutional role.
Absolutely.